Hi, I'm David Rice, and my goal this year was to try to ride as many roller coasters as possible. But this year is 2020, so I was finally able to go to Kings Island on July 4th. I arrived at the park to discover that you need a special pass to ride the new roller coaster Orion. So after I picked up my pass to ride Orion, I made my strategy to tackle Kings Island. I did one lap of the really good roller coasters, at least in my opinion, and then a second lap where I cleaned up all the smaller ones that I don't like as much, and then a third lap where I would re-ride the ones that I liked the best. To start my first loop, I made my way across the park to the Beast. With its mine-like themed station and line, the Beast sets the mood early. The line also provides a view of Orion, which is weird, at least to me, because it shows off the absence of Vortex. Having gone to Kings Island many times at the end of last year and quite a few times in my childhood, it's really weird to have a clear view to the other side of the park and an empty field next to the Beast's out-of-station turnaround. And, as I said while riding the ride, that's so weird not seeing Vortex there. But on to the ride. And here we go! I got a seat really close to the front of the train. In my opinion, front of coaster is best of coaster. The Beast is a legend of a coaster, running through the forest, really fast with twisty turns, and with the exception of a long straight bit with a break at the end, I think it's awesome. Even though I wasn't able to experience on this visit, night rides on the Beast are fantastic. It'll be hard to get one in 2020, but if you can, you should definitely give it a shot. I'm not a huge fan of the ending with the big double helix, but it is the Beast. It just is what it is, and I think it's good for what it is. Next, I made my way over to Mystic Timbers. And let me tell you what, this coaster is really fast and really smooth. I didn't know they could make wooden roller coasters this smooth. It starts with a weird out-of-the-station hill and pop thing. And then the first drop is weird and twisty and really fun. I think of this coaster as a son of Beast if that name hadn't already been used. It runs through the forest really fast and low to the ground. It feels like you're dodging trees, and it's trying to throw you out of your seat every chance it can get. And then, at the very end, after the final brake run, you go into the shed.
This is a
restricted
area.
The highest of theming at Kings Island, where you see lights, shed stuff, and eventually a monster, one of three. Snakes, bats, or, if you're very lucky, a mystic timber. I'm not the biggest fan of theming. Just give me a good ride. But overall, I don't think I can say enough good things about Mystic Timbers. I then worked my way over to Diamondback. Diamondback is in the middle of the park, and you can get good views of it from almost anywhere. With Orion in the park this year, it's interesting to see the comparison between the two B&Ms, or coasters from Belgium. But I'll ride Orion next. This coaster has clamshell-style restraints, which only hold you in by your thighs, which combined with the layout, lets you get amazing airtime. Overall, this thing is an airtime machine, and it's really fun. I think it's one of the best coasters in the park. The ride ends with a dip down into the pond in the middle of the park, throwing up a gigantic rooster tail. The train itself doesn't get wet, but the back car has scoops on the outside edge to redirect the water upward, which I always think is kind of cool. But by the time I got off Diamondback, it was my time to get in line for Orion. The first thing you can't help noticing about Orion is the new entry area they've made, completely revamping what they had when Flight of Fear was the only coaster back there. And the entry area looks really nice. They even have theming, which I don't really understand the story of. What, are we on a space mission to try to stop an asteroid? A manned space mission on a roller coaster? Now, before I start talking about the ride experience, let me put the caveat out there that I've only ridden this once, and I might change my opinion after riding it more. But after my first ride, I really wasn't impressed. Especially after riding Diamondback immediately before. To me, it felt like B&M's impression of Millennium Force, being about 300 feet tall, doing a steep dive, and doing overbank turns with low-to-the-ground helixes. And even then, the helixes isn't so much a thing Millennium Force does. I've only ridden it once, so maybe my opinion will change after riding it more, but I was overall not very impressed. Now on to my second lap of the park. I started with the Racer, a classic wooden racing coaster. I think it was the coaster that started racing coasters. And with that history, it's a must ride. It's also a very rough ride. It has good racing interactions for most rides, but it's still very rough. After that, I went on Adventure Express, a mine train coaster. Last year, I thought this might be the roughest steel roller coaster, but I think I just had a bad ride. It's still rough, but not as bad as I thought. The theming is, I think it's a very appropriate level for a mine train coaster. Right up until the lift hill into the station at the end of the ride. Also, a lift hill into the station? Really? That's no way to end a ride. It's such an anticlimax, even with the giant men on either side going boom, 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 boom. I then went to Banshee, which I know for most people might be surprising to find it in this section of my going around Kings Island. And it's a very fun looping B&M, and I think there are some great elements like that slow roll. For me, there is a rough section near the back of the coaster that I just hate. It feels like it's trying to rattle my teeth out, and an otherwise very smooth coaster, it ruins it for me. So that's why it goes in this section of my overview of the park. I then rode the Bat, formerly known as Top Gun, or formerly known as Flight Deck, which is a swinging suspended coaster. It's a pretty short coaster, and it's smooth. I personally felt like it was trying to rock me to sleep, though. It doesn't do much for me. It does have a nice part on the exit line where you can see the ride. That's kind of cool, though. I then made my way over to Flight of Fear. This is really the most themed ride at Kings Island. Very 90s sci-fi, like Stargate or Star Trek Voyager. And it tries to be spooky with the trains being launched out of the station, then returning to the loading area empty. It is, however, an older roller coaster and very jerky, not smooth at all, as you can clearly tell from my on-ride video. The most useful on-ride video ever made. Wrapping up this lap, I went on Backlot Stunt Coaster, formerly known as the Italian Job Ride. The day I went was very hot, and none of the effects were on. Maybe when it's hot they don't turn on the fireball generator, and if they can't have the fireballs, then they don't have any of the lights, audio, or helicopter either. It's a short ride, but it's still smooth and fun. I then hit up the Beast, Mystic Timbers, and Diamondback before leaving for the night. Overall, a very successful trip to Kings Island. Next weekend, on the 11th, I was able to make my way to Cedar Point, where they had a similar system as they had at Kings Island and Orion to reserve your time slot to enter the queue line. But it was for all their major coasters, including Steel Vengeance, Millennium Force, and Maverick. I was able to get a slot for Steel Vengeance and Millennium Force, but not Maverick on Saturday. Also, I was disappointed to find out that Dragster, Gemini, Rougarou, Wicked Twister, and Blue Streak were closed. To start my day of waiting in line to actually ride roller coasters, not just get tickets to ride roller coasters, I made my way over to Gatekeeper. I really like Gatekeeper because it's smooth, fast, gives really good head and foot chopper moments, and really good floater airtime. I then made my way over to Millennium Force, which is personally one of my favorite roller coasters. It is, however, the first time I've ridden it in the very back seat, and that was crazy. I think I more prefer the front seat, but that pull over the top of the first hill was something else. And for running for 20 years, that thing is still smooth and fast and as fun as ever. It was then time for me to make my way over to Steel Vengeance. Now this ride is just nuts. Built on the skeleton of Mean Streak, they took the wooden tracks off and laid down some insane twisted metal tracks. And let me tell you what, there's a reason they don't allow you to have anything in your pockets on this ride. And the restraints have to hold you by your shins and thighs. In 2019, there was a pouch mounted on the seat behind your legs where they required you to put the contents of your pockets. But in 2020, that pouch is gone, and you have to either put all your personal possessions that you pocketed in a locker or kept with the non-rider. Now, this ride is so fast and non-stop, constantly throwing you out of your seat with insane injector air time. I've noticed the opposite banks turn off the second big hill, and it doesn't stop throwing element after element at you. With the twisting inversions inside the structure, the whole thing is just nuts. You have to ride it to just understand what I'm talking about. I then rode Magnum XL-200, the first hypercoaster. I think most of this ride is really fun, but it's definitely showing its age. Those last hills before the brake run really hurt, slamming your thighs into the lap bar and then immediately slamming your butt back into the seat. If I had infinite money, I would definitely reprofile those last few hills, because the rest of the ride I think is pretty good. I then rode Valravn. It's a dive coaster. It dives. It's really meh, in my opinion. It's a one-trick pony, and I don't think that trick is that great. Every time I've ridden it, I've never thought it was worth the wait. For my last ride of Saturday, I rode Raptor. And my camera ran out of battery, so I don't have that much good video of Raptor. I think this ride has some really good and fun elements, but the helix before the final brake run is not fun. Pulling all the blood into your feet and pushing you painfully back into your seat. I think it ruins the whole rest of the ride. I was then out of time on Saturday, so I returned Sunday to see what I could ride. I waited an hour and 40 minutes to get my line reservation ticket for Maverick, something I didn't have a problem with on Saturday. I just walked up to where they were handing out tickets for Millennium Force and Steel Vengeance and got one. After waiting to get my ticket to ride Maverick, I still had to wait until it was my time slot, so I occupied that time by riding the Cedar Creek Mine Ride. This is very underwhelming. It's slow, with 2 lift hills. It may be good for kids, but I've definitely outgrown it. After all that, it was finally time to ride Maverick. This thing is really fun. Even though the soft restraints dig into my neck every time the coaster whips back and forth, it still has a lot of positives. The launched lift hill is like nothing else I've ever ridden, and even if I don't like how it whips back and forth, it does feel like a horse trying to buck you off, which is very good with the theming. This ride isn't quite as relentless as Steel Vengeance, but it is pretty constant. The mid-course break and understation launch is another really fun part. As I had somewhere to be Sunday night, that was my day at Cedar Point. As I rode the Sky Ride back to the main entrance, I thought about how Kings Island seemed way more ready for opening month crowds than Cedar Point did. I got 14 rides in at Kings Island in one day versus 8 coaster rides at Cedar Point in 2 days. Anyway, if you want to see me talk about the other coasters at Cedar Point I wasn't able to ride in July, leave a comment or a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, God bless and have a great day. Just a quick end note. Before 2019, the last time I'd been to Kings Island was about 2006, and the last time I'd been to Cedar Point was about 2007. So I never rode X-Flight. And the X-Base area had been pretty much unchanged from my perspective in between then and 2019.